Nothing really hit the ground running with the first device in their lineup, the Phone 1. The firm's first smartphone ships with a close to AOSP build, but it has taken longer than expected to release Nothing OS 1.5 atop Android 13, at least in beta form. But just what does this new and improved experience offer? We've gone hands-on to find out. Thanks for watching 9to5 Google here on YouTube. Remember to thumbs up, hit subscribe and then tap the bell icon to be among the first to watch our upcoming videos. So to get started, we're going to look at the lock screens of both of these devices. There are some changes that are here present in Android 13 on the Nothing Phone 1, which aren't present in Android 12, running here on the White Phone 1. So if we turn over, I'm just going to show you this first, as this is one of those things that makes the most sense to take a look at right away. As you can see, I've got some unread notifications on my home screen, and you can see that with Android 13, this now bundles these notifications together so that you can only potentially see up to 2 to 3 notifications at once, and then these will be bundled down here with a slight overflow. So obviously if I expand that, that can open up these notifications so I can see those, but obviously we're going to take a look at the lock screen properly. That's not present here on Android 12, that's just a flat look at the lock screen. It just shows everything and they'll bundle together. Anything will just expand down the bottom of the display, any that are unread. So there's a big major difference as well straight away with the handling of notifications on Nothing OS 1.5 and Nothing OS 1.17, Android 12, Android 13 basically. And we can take a look again at the lock screen because there are some notable changes here to how the clock is visible basically. You'll notice right away that the lock screen widget looks a lot more like the at a glance widget found on Pixel phones here on Nothing OS 13. You can see that once I expand that, the larger clock there has the time and the date with the weather below it. On Android 12, if I put that one down, you can see that this is a little bit smaller. The date is definitely not quite as prominent. You can still see that double line clock here, but the weather is just more of a little bit of a side note effectively. It gives you the current location, connection, conditions, and that just seems to be pretty bog standard as it was in Android 12. But obviously side by side, you can see it's a lot larger. There's what seems to be interesting conflicting weather conditions as well in the same location, but that's by the by. You can also see as well that there are some cosmetic changes, but we'll talk about those in just a moment. Okay, so that's a lock screen more or less covered. There's some cosmetic changes that I'll talk about in a moment, but let's get into these devices, get these unlocked, and I'll show you the quick settings panel so that you can get an idea of what has changed here too. So if I swipe them down slightly, I don't know if it's a placebo effect, but it definitely feels a little bit smoother on Android 13. Not sure if that's me, but you'll straight away notice that the toggles or the icons for no notifications being available is more centralized here in Android 13, and it's definitely tied to the top of the notification toggles here in Android 12. Once I expand that slightly, it also might spot some changes straight away. Here in Android 12, Nothing OS still uses the common unified internet toggle, so that includes Wi-Fi, mobile data, and the hotspot functionality. And that was something that was, I'm not sure if people like that or hate that, but here in Android 13, you'll notice that the unified toggle only has Wi-Fi and mobile data connections. Obviously, I don't have a SIM installed in either of those, but the hotspot is now its own individual toggle. So that means that if I want to turn on the hotspot, I go down here. In Android 12, you're using this toggle, which does slow things down a little bit. It's then comes up in its own tied up functionality here, which is pinned to the bottom of the screen. I think I prefer this method because obviously it depends heavily on what you want to do. If I long press and hold, it'll take me to the hotspot settings. Whereas here, it's a little bit janky in the sense that you've got to expand, go in and tap that. That's not the only change though, as we have some alterations as well to the other toggles that are available. Here in Android 12, you don't actually have the option to quickly scan QR codes, which is baked in here in Android 13. This basically activates Google Lens so that you can quickly access a QR code scanner, scan things and access them. That's really nice little usability feature, but it doesn't actually exist here in Android 12 natively. There might be third-party apps that can do that, but that's not available here at all. That's probably the only other change here in Android 13 is actually the new active apps functionality. So this basically gives you background applications. I can tap this and it'll show me anything that's currently running in the background. I can stop that active application, so that should free up some system resources, unless it's a persistent application. In that case, Wavelet is. But yeah, that's the two major functionality changes in the quick settings panel, but I'll talk about some of the cosmetic changes in a little bit. A couple of other functionality changes to the quick settings panel that I probably need to note here as well before we get into the cosmetic changes later on is when I actually access this, if I tap the Wi-Fi, that will turn that on and off here, whereas in Android 13, this creates that floating panel, which is commonplace on Pixel devices, opening up the little internet connection options so I can select any networks, turn off the Wi-Fi. It does slow things down a little bit, but if I go here and fully expand, that will actually disable that. So it's a 2-tap process as opposed to a single tap over here, which does the same thing. Expand that, disable that. So there's a little bit of a usability difference here. I think that it's quite disappointing that nothing has disabled that, because I know that some people really like the ability to just turn Wi-Fi on and off. It's the same for Bluetooth as well. So if I have the Bluetooth menus open here, tap that here, you can see that will disable it. Or when I re-enable it, it can just bring up this floating panel, give me any Bluetooth options that I can connect to right here. In Android 12, it's a more stacked or more applied panel. So basically, floating panel here, docked panel here, which is obviously stuck here. It's a little bit smaller, a little bit harder to read. I don't know if that's a proponent of Android 12L that's just kind of bled over, and this is not making this available because this was actually available on Android 12L and Pixel devices. Although not directly tied to the quick settings panel, when we actually open up some music and we get some music playing, you can see that we have some changes to the media panel here with the media player notification. That's actually the Android 13 version here, which has that scrubber playback progress indicator, slightly different controls. I have the Bluetooth picker as well for anything that pops up. It's tied to the kind of pinned to the UI here, and it's for that floating style in Android 13 that Google seems to have gone for. I can also quickly adjust the volume and things like that, but obviously I'll turn that off. You can see that that works quite effectively, and I can obviously choose to Chromecast from this menu as well. That's a recent change, but overall the new media center notification, media player notification is just a little bit tidy. I've got a lot more controls at my disposal. I can kind of skip forward and backward, but it doesn't actually have those squiggly line effects that you'll find on Pixel. I'm unsure if this will arrive, but for now it's a basic way of doing things. Sometimes this seems to skip forward and backward on tracks if you try and scrub that forward and backward, but for the most part it seems to work really, really well. And obviously you can see that as well on the lock screen. The two players are slightly different. This one takes up a lot more space, and while this adheres to material you color theming based upon your wallpaper, this is tied to the album art that's available as of the song or the podcast or video, whatever you happen to be playing. It will theme based upon that. One of the change that has been added, which probably should have been in Android 12 here, is that when I go into the Recents application, Recents menu section, as it would be called, you can actually use the screenshot tool to quickly grab a screenshot here. That doesn't exist in Android 12 in any metric on the Nothing Phone 1 or Nothing OS 1.17, but for some reason it seems to be slowly added to Android 13. There's no option to select text, but at least you can hit that screenshot button and quickly grab a screenshot of any open application and use the share and edit markup tools, which do exist when you do take a normal screenshot. Obviously, I'll just show that for consistency. You can see that it's slightly faster here as well. You have the same tools available to use the markup, and it's not a great deal of difference, but overall, it just makes things a little bit snappier for grabbing screenshots on the go. Nothing OS 1.5 also has another neat little Android 13 trick up its sleeve. If I go to an article here, for instance, on a website, you now have the option or a small pop-up menu for copied text. If I copy that, it brings me the brand new share sheet. So that obviously gives me the option to share this or share through applications or use another option. If I want to, it'll give me the option to use nearby share as well, which is another neat feature. For quickly sharing things, it doesn't mean that you have to open the application and share that like it would be here in Android 12. If I copy that, it just copies it to the clipboard without giving me any toast option or any pop-up to confirm that, whereas here, it's just a little bit neater. You have that little docked option here, which gives you the options to share or quickly use to nearby share feature to your other devices. A major part of the new privacy tools in Android 13 is the brand new photo picker. So that means basically applications that support it will allow you to add a picture. I use the view gallery option. It'll then let you select limited options from your gallery. So it can't access any of your other files. If you do choose that option, I can just choose albums or photos and then select individual options and then send them as I see fit. That means that only those are available. Here in Android 12, if I want to access the gallery, to attach photos and videos, I have to allow access to all of those. And then it'll just open up the traditional file picker, which is slightly more cumbersome, but this is a little bit neater. It's docked to the bottom. It gives you the option of just a fairly limited selection of images and means that you have a little bit more safety, a little bit more privacy there. It's a little bit tidier as far as I'm concerned. I just think that being able to select one or two at a time is pretty nice. Just select those and you can just add those to your video or your messaging service. Quickly add those in one go. Nothing's also added some of the enhanced theming options that you'll find as part of the updated material view and dynamic color guidelines that have been added in Android 13. So if I go to the customization option, you'll see this is the same, basically the same menu here. If I select the icon pack, there's a new default themed icon section here, which is not available in Android 12, but is available here in Android 13. So if I tap that, basically this just is the same as themed icons that you'll find on Pixel phones that will theme every single application that is supported on your device. You can kind of get an idea of just what they look like right there. And every time you change your wallpaper, these should adhere to the traditional dynamic color settings. So if I set that and then go back, you can see now that they have basically all of my icons are themed on the home screen, which fits with the rest of my aesthetic, whereas this is just a bog standard default circular icons as part of the original Nothing OS release. That's not all though. If I go back into the customization, there's also enhanced wallpaper and style colors. So if you go down here to the colors that are available as part of the theming that you choose, and it can pick wallpapers based upon colors from your wallpaper, there's now enhanced options. You now have 16 color swatches to pick from, along with the traditional 4 basic colors that are part of the original version. Over here, it's just 4 and 4. And what's interesting is that this will pick up more tones from your wallpapers as part of Android 13. Basically, you can just choose those and that will theme all of the icons, such as your quick settings panel. It will theme all of the themed icons if you do have that set. It's just a little bit extra. It's a little bit of a nice tool. Obviously, you can choose from your 4 basic colors here as traditional. The app grid is also still limited to 5x5. There's no extra options there. So if you want extra layout options, you're going to have to use a third-party launcher on your device. Another core change added in Android 13, which is available now on Nothing OS 1.5, is the per app language control. So basically, if you go down to system on both the devices, you have the option to go to language as an input. On Nothing OS Android 12 version, you only have a system-wide language available. So that basically will set languages based upon every single app that you use. You can switch between those as you see fit if you do have you do speak multiple languages or you're learning one. Here in Android 13, you can actually set languages for apps on an app-by-app basis. So for instance, I can go in and set the calculator to, let's try German. So basically, every time I launch the calendar, it should, if I set that correctly, and I set it as Germany, I can go back in and go to the calculator application, and these will basically change all of the language options here to my chosen dialect, whatever it happens to be. Here in Android 12, you still have to set that on a system-wide basis and change that when you need to. Nothing OS 1.5 also has a lot of brand new changes and features which you won't find here in Android 12. A lot of these tend to be related to features that may have been on older versions of Pixel phones and older versions of Android, but have slowly been added to this third-party skin of Android 13. So let's dive in and get into some of these new features added. So I'm going to put this one away for a moment because we don't actually need this because the features are not available here in Android 12. But here in Nothing OS 1.5, there's a lot of new little things that we need to talk about. First of these, I think, and most importantly, is probably the brand new personal safety application, which is actually the first time this has been used outside of a Pixel phone. Personal safety is an application that's baked into Android, and what this does is it gives you features like car crash detection, although there isn't actually live here in Nothing OS. So I'm not sure if this may come in a future build or if it's just limited still to Pixels, at least for the time being, although there has been preparation for that. There is also options for emergency sharing, so you can basically set that up to share your location with people. If you happen to hit a certain number of keys on your phone, like the power button, you may hit that 5 times. It may call emergency services. There's also options about setting up for earthquake alerts, that kind of thing, adding your medical information so that if you do happen to get into an accident or whatever happens to be, emergency services can quickly grab your phone and select that from the lock screen. And also this will access your location data while your phone is running in the background. If you have a SIM in it, it will access certain features as well. So I'm not sure if this is limited to SIM phones with SIMs in, or if it is actually, as this notes, limited to this device because it is potentially running a preview version. But there is definitely work going on to implement this in versions of Android other than what is found on Pixel phones. But that's a nice new addition. You can find that within the actual safety and emergency section as part of the settings menu. Another big new addition is that of the game dashboard for mobile gamers. So if we go into settings and we go into the system section, you should see an option for a game mode. Well, this was available here in Android 12, as you'll notice on the original Nothing OS builds. It didn't actually have as many features as what is available as part of the game mode here, or enhanced game dashboard as part of Android 13. So what game dashboard is, as you'll see there, is a set of tools which allows you to access improved functionality for games, use a floating icon for when games are being played. This will just appear effectively when you run selected titles, but at the present it doesn't seem to work absolutely everywhere. I have a few applications installed to try this, but it seems to only work in a few. As you can see, that game mode has been activated by running Subway Surfers, which is one of Nothing's kind of tested options. If I just kind of go through here and check that, you can actually see that this little floating icon on screen lets me access some features like streaming to YouTube Live, access an FPS indicator, so I can see just what the FPS is, enable do not disturb mode, start screen recording, or even grab a screenshot, all from this option. But as you can see, there's extra options here that are grayed out for the time being. These may come with future updates, but this is technically as part of the Google Play services or Google system, so it can come via Play Store update for most devices, but that can just be dismissed at any time. You can access this little functionality, drag that around, and you can see that the frame rate is now running hovering around that 60 mark, but it doesn't seem to work absolutely everywhere. But this is one of the few titles where it does work effectively. It just gives you that tool set so I can quickly grab screenshots without having to really stretch too far, not having to effectively pause the game. And yeah, it's a nice feature all the same. I'm not really convinced that I will use it, but a lot of mobile gamers out there probably will be looking to try this out for themselves. But as you can see, there's options as well to tie that to your YouTube account and then quickly sign that in. Nothing has also updated the controls for the volume control panel here on the side. So if I touch the volume here, you can see that there is basically, it looks almost identical. But what you might not notice is if I tap that 3-dot menu here in Android 13, I have controls for setting the volume of ringtones, that kind of thing. I also have alarm ringtone volumes, and I have the system volume here as well. And if I tap that See More panel, I can go straight to the sound and vibration page, whereas over here in Android 12, tapping that brings up this docked menu, which I do think is slightly better to access all of the settings, but you still have to hit See More to access this same page. Overall though, I think if you can access multiple controls from this one side panel, it's a pretty nice addition. But it also ties in as well here. You may notice another icon that makes a little bit of sense. You're not going to see this in Android 12, but there is a live caption option here. So if I tap that, it enables the ability to add live captions for videos. This is just basically machine learning generated live captions for all kinds of things like YouTube videos. So if I go in and test this, and we'll pick this first one, I don't actually have the sound activated here, so it's minimum volume. You will see text on screen when it is detected. So you can see there's a small captions there for this particular option. If you double tap that, it can increase the size of it. So I can basically read along without having to have the sound activated. This is a really nice addition, and it's good to see that Nothing has added this in Nothing OS because it was a glaring omission. It has been available for some time on previous Android builds. And finally, the last new addition that was touted as well before launch is the brand new weather application, the brand new internally developed Nothing weather application. You can find that down here. This is a really, really nice touch. I think this is one of the best new additions as part of that recorder. It sometimes takes a little while like this to load up the information, but it comes from AccuWeather. So it looks really, really in keeping with Nothing's style that they've appropriated for Nothing OS. It's that really like digital dot matrix style, and it's really in keeping. It's a shame there are no extra widgets as part of this, but you can obviously look and see things like the current weather conditions, what the temperature looks like, UV index, all that kind of thing. And then obviously I'm getting there a weather warning in this application. It'll give me notifications throughout the day. But yeah, it's a really nice app. Looks visually really appealing. You can tell that as well. It's powered by AccuWeather, so it should be pretty spot on. I can add locations as well, see the current conditions in places I may be attempting to visit in future. I just want to keep track of those. But overall, yeah, it's a pretty solid, if basic weather application, but it's a lot better than some of the other default options that you do have in Android. It won't be another Android update though without some cosmetic changes, as you'll notice these straight away from the lock screen in Nothing OS 1.5. If you do happen to have the home controls enabled, you'll notice that the icon is slightly smaller. It's the newer version here in Android 13 on the right and the older version on the left. It's definitely a lot more accessible here in Android 12, which is an interesting one, but this is the new icon. It's slightly out of the way, doesn't get in the way of any of the UI elements, but it has the same functionality here anyway. It'll just open up your home controls if you've accessed those, or if you do have access to those on your lock screen. Although it's not currently visible on this particular device due to some other issues with Google Pay not working on this particular open beta build, you'll also notice that the wallet icon is going to be slightly bigger than in the full version when this is available and working here in Android 13 as well. Another cosmetic change that you might not have noticed here in Nothing OS, that unless you're running these side by side, is actually the change to the actual spacing of these icons here on the home screen. As you'll notice that the persistent Google search widget is in the same position, but there's a slightly different spacing between these icons at the bottom of the dock and the start of the icons on your home screen. You'll notice that when these are side by side, you can just about make out that there is a slight difference if I put those two together. They're just a little bit higher up in the screen here on Nothing OS 1.5 versus 1.17. Overall though, it's not a major change, it's just something for a little bit extra spacing, but that may have had a slight knock-on effect as well here for the at-a-glance widget or Nothing's widget, persistent time and search widget here. You'll notice, well, if I tap the weather here, that actually doesn't do anything. It just takes me straight to AccuWeather in the website, whereas here it will open, if I can get that to work, that will take me to the Nothing weather application, which is using the same data from this anyway. So it's not a great big deal, but it is something to note. If you do tap that, tapping the time and date will just take you to the calendar, as it used to do previously. Throughout Android 13, Google has added a lot more rounded aesthetics and a lot of more softening of buttons and things like that. Here in Android 13 for Nothing OS 1.5, you can also see that straight away. If I open up the recents menu, it's probably the most prominent. You notice here that the clear all button is kind of a floating text, where it's actually in a circular, more visible M3 button, and obviously you can tap that a little bit more readily. It just makes things a little bit easier to reach and to view those. As well, when we open up the quick settings panel, you'll also notice that the docked, edit, power and settings buttons are also slightly changed here in Android 13. You can see that they're docked to the bottom. So I have power controls here. I have the settings option to go into the settings. And if I open that again, and then the edit toggle is tied to the quick settings toggles here. Whereas in Android 12, it just remains slightly above the media control panel, which I think is a slightly easier way to do things here because it's a little bit more prominent, or a little bit more accessible for reachability purposes. But overall, it's not a major change. The functionality remains the same. It's just slight layout differences. Another minor cosmetic change that is definitely tied more to Android 13 is in how the prompts for location are kind of handled. So if I go over here and select my location, I want to select here, I want to select my location. You'll notice that there are some changes to how the on-screen prompt looks. It's just a little bit more visible here. There's definitely a little bit of extra spacing. you can notice that in Android 12 it's the older squared off sign. Things are a little bit more rounded and they adhere to Material You and dynamic color theming, but overall it's not a major change, it's just one that makes things a little bit more easier to manage and a little bit more visible. So one thing I think a lot of fans out there, myself included, are hoping for with Android 13 is improved performance, although that said, the performance is pretty adequate for a mid-ranger with the Nothing Phone 1. So this obviously is Android 13 and Android 12, and Nothing is touting a 50% speed increase in loading the application. So I've got a few applications here on my home screen, so I want to try and open these and see just if that is true. It might not be the case with every single application, but just to prove to you, I'm going to close all of my applications here. Let's go and let's try running along this side, and we'll go from Play Store to all the way through to YouTube Music and then hopefully to Twitter to see just if there is a difference. So let's try with the Play Store first. See, actually we had a little bit of an edge there. Might be something for loading speed in terms of Wi-Fi, but let's try YouTube. Definitely a slight edge here. I'm not seeing this full 50%, but maybe we're seeing it there on the camera. YouTube Music, definitely a win there for Android 13. Again, Android 13 winning out here and Nothing OS 1.5. The last one. Yeah, I definitely think there maybe is something to this, but overall it's not a huge difference, but it might make a difference to you day to day when you're loading a lot of applications up on your phone, bringing them up from cold. There definitely seems to be a little bit of a speed boost. Whether or not it's 50% remains to be seen. Another supposed performance gain with Nothing OS 1.5 is the standby optimization. So this is part of the battery and performance thing. So what this should do is effectively improve sleep data management. So basically it means that you should not have your phone draining so fast when it is in that sleep mode. So that basically means when we go and leave it on a lock screen for a long period, you don't activate or access your phone. Maybe you put it face down and activate the do not disturb mode. This should hopefully increase that longevity, limits the mobile data and some of the other features for that added battery saving functionality. But overall, I'm not seeing anything yet. I've only been running this for around 24 hours, so we'll hopefully get some more indication of this if this makes a difference. As you notice, it's not actually available here in Android 12, but it is something that we'd like to see maybe bleed out and come to more devices and have more devices out there using such functionality to improve that standby time, as it's always something where iOS definitely has a boost over Android. So while this is the first open beta for Android 13, I have to say, so far so good with Nothing OS 1.5 running on Nothing Phone 1. There are a few known issues though that you need to be made aware of, and the first one of these is actually the inability to make wireless payments or NFC payments using Google Wallet. It seems to work just fine here on Android 12, but you will have problems. There is failures in Android 13, which means it won't pass a CTS check and you can't use wireless payments with your device. So if you do want to try this on your main device or it's your sole device that you own, do not go and put Android 13 on if you do need to access Google Pay, making wireless payments. That's not all though, as there are some supposed issues with Netflix. You may encounter problems with some of the videos that you do want to play. It might not work as expected, but I have to say, so far it seems to be pretty good for me. I haven't noticed anything major. It seems to play things pretty much fine, but it is worth noting that you may not be able to view things in HD. You may have problems with the app not running as you expect it, but it seems to work fine here in Android 13 for me. So that's just a little bit anecdotal. Adding to that, there is also a problem with supposed problems with the picture-in-picture mode. You may get issues with videos not playing correctly in their pop-up window. I can resize them just fine here in Android 13. It seems to work fine for me, but it is a little bit laggy. You can dismiss them pretty much with no problems, but you may encounter issues if you do want to try and play these play videos in picture-in-picture mode. So take that with a grain of salt, try it for yourself. If you're having problems, then you'll know exactly what the problem is. That's more or less everything available in the Nothing OS 1.5 open beta, which is of course based upon Android 13. It isn't a huge volume of changes by any stretch of the imagination, but a lot of that is actually owed to Android 13 which itself is a consolidatory update for Google versus that massive Android 12 build, which obviously is available in stable for Nothing Phone 1. So far, I have to say that it runs fairly nicely. I am hesitant to suggest that someone sideloads this on their main device or their default device, but we do have links to files if you are eager to try this out for yourself down in the comments sections below, with a basic sideloading guide also available via the links that you can check out for yourself. I want to ask you though, what do you think? Is it a good update? Is it the close to AOSP build or the close to Pixel Experience build that you want? Let us know down in the comment sections below what you think. And if you'd like us to take another look at Nothing OS when the stable launch comes, then be sure to drop a comment down there too. Hopefully though you enjoyed this breakdown and comparison. But until next time, this is Damien with 9to5 Google saying thanks for watching, and I will speak to you later.